Bobby Baccalieri doesn't speak much, which is why most people misread him. He arrives in the story not with a bang, but with a nod, soft-spoken, carrying extra weight and less menace than the average button man. He looks like the one guy who might apologize for the weather. And because the world of North Jersey respects noise, suits, and stories more than quiet competence, it's easy to tag Bobby as harmless or slow. Before we continue further, I would like to invite all of you to subscribe to my new channel, which is going to be the first link on the description below. In that channel, I will be doing similar video analysis like I am doing here, but it will be for every show or movie that I feel deserves an analysis done. Thank you, and let's start with the rest of the video. But if you track him closely, how he watches, how he obeys, where he draws lines, you start to see a pretty firm answer to the question of what Bobby really thought about Tony Soprano. It isn't simple adoration or blind fear. It's a layered loyalty built from hierarchy, gratitude, and a practical man's awareness that he's tethered to a powerful, volatile son. Tony is the boss. Bobby accepts that as fact. But Bobby is also a husband, a son, and eventually a father who understands risk. He recognizes that Tony's strength is real, and also that Tony's storms are capable of sinking the boat with everyone in it. In Bobby's mind, those two truths never stop wrestling. To get there, you have to start with Junior. Bobby's relationship with Junior is the soil out of which his idea of the boss grows. He first serves a man who is old school formalism incarnate, rules, routine, and pride. Junior's not gentle, but he's legible. He expects respect, punctuality, and distance. He exploits loyalty, but is remarkably consistent in how he does it. Working for Junior teaches Bobby the shape of the job: take the call, drive the car, keep the mouth shut, defend the hierarchy. It's not that Bobby idolizes Junior. He simply understands the contract. In return for loyalty and discretion, Junior provides a predictable orbit. Even when Junior's health falters and his temper sharpens, the operating system is familiar. Junior loves order the way he loves his old jokes. He repeats them because they make the world stay put. Tony is different. Tony is a storm system pretending to be the sky. He's charismatic, juvenile, calculating, generous, cruel, insightful, and impulsive, frequently in the span of 10 minutes. Where Junior sees the rules as a cathedral, Tony treats them like drywall, useful until they're in the way. Bobby's first sustained impression of Tony is this paradox: the man's power is unquestionable, but the logic governing that power is more fluid than the one he learned under Junior. Bobby files that away like a mechanic listening to a new engine. It runs strong, it accelerates fast, but the timing chain rattles sometimes. That rattle means risk. Bobby's default posture toward power is deference. He's deferential to Junior out of duty and habit. He's deferential to Tony out of duty and caution. Around Tony, Bobby learns to read the air. He notices when Tony is hunting for respect, when he's measuring who belongs in the inner ring, when he wants jokes to land or silence to thicken. Bobby is not a born flatterer like some of the crew, but he understands the value of staying out of the boss's line of fire. And he also understands the longer game. If you are useful, calm, and competent, Tony will promote you, because Tony is ultimately a pragmatist. One way to read Bobby's early politeness is cowardice. Another way, and the more accurate one, is that he uses politeness as armor to do his real job: keep the machine running without inviting unpredictable explosions. This is why Tony grows comfortable with Bobby. For all his appetite for dangerous personalities, Tony has an obvious need for at least one man he can rely on, one whose emotions don't ride with every wave. Bobby never drinks to make a point. He doesn't chase a shiny scheme. He doesn't flirt with a guma on the corners of Satriali's. Is he married, then widowed, then married again? His life runs on family rails. This isn't morality as a sermon, it's morality as ballast. Tony, who is constantly tilting, appreciates that even if he sometimes wants to knock it over just to prove he can. Bobby, for his part, looks at Tony the way a careful driver looks at a muscle car, admiring the torque, respecting the danger, and never forgetting that one bad turn at speed is how you end up in the guardrail. The Junior piece deepens all this. When Junior goes under house arrest, it's Bobby who fills the role no one wants: nurse fixer, chauffeur, human buffer against humiliation. Bobby is there for the old man not only because it's the job, but because Bobby's loyalty has a domestic texture. He knows what it means to maintain a person's dignity when they can't maintain it themselves. Junior's decline disturbs him, particularly the flickers of paranoia and bitterness, but it doesn't shake his fundamentals. Bobby absorbs the lesson that power ages poorly when left to its own self-regard. He sees in Junior what happens when a boss believes the title alone will keep the room standing. When he later watches Tony, so much more kinetic, so much more alive, Bobby holds those two pictures next to each other. One is a candle blowing out in a drafty hallway. The other is a bonfire that might catch the curtains. Did Bobby like Tony? The word like is too thin. in. Bobby respected Tony, feared him a little, and grew fond of him in ways he would never confess outside of a joke or comfortable silence. He enjoyed Tony's moments of generosity, the rare afternoons when Tony's soul felt safe enough to be playful. He liked the way Tony could settle a room with one look or pour gravy like any other suburban dad. But liking Tony was never the point. The point was living under Tony, and living under Tony required two kinds of reading: seeing Tony clearly and lying to yourself just enough to keep believing this could still be a good life. Bobby's moral center is the anchor for that balancing act. He's consistently one of the only men in the crew who retains an instinctive recoil from pointless cruelty. He doesn't want to wear a gun unless necessary. He isn't proud of the violence, he treats it like a grim utility. When Tony tests the limits, humiliations disguised as ball busting, jobs assigned to punish rather than to optimize, Bobby feels the friction. He will not say it out loud. He will not even always show it on his face. But he files away each small injustice the boss imposes. The jab that cuts too deep, the favor, that's really a leash. The way a private grievance turns into public theater. Under Junior, Bobby learned that dignity is a daily practice. Under Tony, he learns that dignity sometimes needs to be defended against the boss himself. That's why the infamous family weekend matters so much. It's the one time Bobby's body says what his mouth never would. He is a large man who carries his size like a burden, a gentle giant who wants to settle arguments by steering them away from the cliff. But he has a limit. The fight with Tony is ugly and strangely intimate. Alcoholism, pride, and boredom fuse into a private war of dominance. In beating Tony, Bobby does something he never set out to do. He breaks the law of the room. And the second he wins, he understands the cost. Tony will not let that go. To Tony, that weekend becomes a debt ledger. To Bobby, it becomes a permanent caution sign. Even the boss's friendship is conditional and can turn instantly into humiliation disguised as an assignment. The punishment assignment, sending Bobby to make his first full kill, says everything about Tony and clarifies everything for Bobby. From Tony's angle, it is both a test and a retaliation. Tony knows Bobby's hands are relatively clean, so he stains them. He knows Bobby loves his family, so he puts him on a job that will return home with him and sit at the dinner table like an invisible guest. It's not that Tony needs the murder done by Bobby specifically, it's that Tony wants Bobby specifically to do a murder. For Tony, it reasserts a hierarchy that the fight blurred. For Bobby, it's the moment his loyalty becomes fused with grief. He carries out the job, competent as always, efficient and contained. But the weight changes him, not in a swaggering way, not in a way that makes him behave more like a real gangster, but in a quieter way, he becomes haunted. He now knows that Tony's control over him includes the authority to ask him to trade a piece of himself for the safety of the family order, and that Bobby will do it. So what does Bobby think of Tony after that? He doesn't hate him. He doesn't plot against him. He tightens. He grows more careful, more deliberate, more protective of Janice and the kids. He makes sure the money flows. He supervises with a steady hand. He becomes the exact kind of man Tony needs at the end, reliable, unflashy, and morally sturdy enough to be trusted with sensitive tasks. And yet, when you watch Bobby share space with Tony after that weekend, you can see the new geometry. Bobby's eyes measure the room. His jokes are thinner. He rarely initiates. If Tony is the son, Bobby turns his face just enough to avoid a burn. Respect is still there, but something like love, or the nearest thing Bobby would have allowed himself, an affectionate ease, has been replaced by a wary gratitude. Junior's shadow is still on the wall. Bobby continues to visit him, to deal with his resentments and his decline, and in doing so he keeps the ledger. Junior once represented continuity, now he represents decay. Tony represents vigor. He also represents volatility. Bobby's private prayer is for a third way, to live inside the machine with enough predictability to raise children who won't be broken by it. He believes that under Tony, this is barely possible, and only if everyone does their job without calling attention to themselves. That's the heart of Bobby's concept of leadership. The boss's mandate is to keep the temperature steady. Tony can do this on Tuesdays and ruin it on Wednesdays. Bobby admires the Tuesdays, he braces for the Wednesdays. Because Bobby's mind is essentially domestic, he sees Tony most clearly in domestic settings. Around Carmela, Tony is lighter but still transactional. Around the kids, he's a father trying to be what he never had. Bobby understands that version of Tony and likes him best there. He loves simple rituals, meals, games, stories, and he finds in Tony a flicker of the normal life he himself wants to protect. But even in those moments, Bobby keeps one eye on the threshold. He knows that the call can come, the fight can start, the insult can spark. Living under Tony is living in a house where the lights sometimes flicker because the wiring was always a little off. Is the warmth worth the occasional blackout? Bobby's answer is yes, but only because the alternative is to leave the city entirely, and that is a river he has never learned to cross. One of the cleanest windows into Bobby's head is how he handles rank. When he's promoted, he doesn't gloat, he organizes, he takes the receipt seriously. He treats men under him with the firm decency he wishes had been standard above him. He will get his hands dirty when he must, but he doesn't perform violence to audition for attention. In this, Bobby is almost a rebuke to Tony's theatrical streak. Tony needs drama to feel alive. Bobby needs routine to stay intact. That difference shapes Bobby's judgment. He thinks thinks Tony is a good boss when Tony trusts the system, and a dangerous one when he tries to be the whole system himself. It isn't a philosophical complaint that Bobby would ever voice. It's just the way he tightens his jaw when a plan turns into a performance. Now bring Junior back one more time at his most diminished. This is the day the entire idea of the boss is forced to face its mortality. Junior's mind slips, his memory frays, and he becomes the opposite of what he once demanded, unpredictable, because he cannot help it. Bobby's loyalty endures anyway, which tells you everything about how he measures people. He doesn't abandon the helpless, even when they used to be tyrants. He sees in Junior a warning to Tony and a warning to himself. Power is renting a room in a building with leaks. Age will find you. When Tony shows real fear about succession and legacy, Bobby understands more than he says. He sues where he can. He offers competence where it will help, but he's not a visionary or a schemer. He doesn't dream of remaking the order. He dreams of preserving the little lives inside it. If there's a single sentence that captures what Bobby thought about Tony, it is this: he's the boss, and he's my boss. And I hope he can be the best version of himself more days than not. That's not hero worship. That's a working man's faith. It includes disappointment, the fights, the punishments, the needless humiliations. It includes admiration, the leadership in a crisis, the surprising tenderness, the clarity of a decisive call. It includes fear, because Tony's bad days can be lethal. And it includes something like love, the kind that grows in the trenches when you've driven the same roads together and buried the same ghosts. Bobby would never say the word out loud. He would show it by being there. One last piece of the trains. Bobby's love of model trains isn't random quirk. It's the metaphor he never articulates. Trains run on tracks laid by other hands, guided by signals and schedules, built to connect places and keep time. You don't make your own path. You maintain the path. You prevent derailments. You marvel at the weight moving cleanly through space. That's Bobby's worldview. Junior was a track that led to the past, a predictable line whose stops you could memorize. Tony is a line that changes schedules, cuts new switches, and risks pushing speed where the rails bend. Bobby respects both lines for what they were, and he fears what happens when the operator confuses the thrill of acceleration with the excellence of arrival. If you asked him in private and with no consequences whether Tony is a good boss, he'd probably answer like this: he can be. He is when he wants to be. It's just, you gotta hope he wants to be. From that view, Bobby's quiet arc makes perfect sense. He's promoted not because he clamors for spotlight, but because Tony senses he can trust Bobby's steadiness. He accepts the blood on his hands not because he's numb, but because he understands what the job now requires and what refusing would say about his loyalty. He keeps showing up for Junior because loyalty doesn't expire when glory does. He holds his family close because the only way to survive in the orbit of a sun like Tony is to store warmth when you have it and protect it when the temperature drops. Is there bitterness in him? Some. It leaks out in a glance, in the set of his shoulders, in the way he looks at Janice when she wants the more performative bonuses of mob life. But bitterness never turns to betrayal, because betrayal isn't in Bobby's bones. What is in his bones is the conviction that if he does the right things, the job, the schedule, the rituals, maybe the worst outcomes can be postponed. Maybe the children will grow. Maybe the home will hold. Bobby's thought about Tony is constantly translated into action. Do this well, do it quietly, don't give the boss a reason to doubt you, and maybe the group will survive Tony's moods. That's not a romantic ideology. It's practical faith. This is why his end stings. The way Bobby goes reveals the tragic math he's always been doing. He's in a place of comfort and continuity, a store that sells his favorite illusion, machines that always run on time, and the randomness of the life he chose catches him anyway. If you ask what he was thinking about Tony in those final weeks, it's likely a mix of gratitude that Tony valued him, fatigue from the ways Tony pushed him, and a stubborn hope that if he kept doing what he'd always done, show up, organize, protect, the storm might move on. He isn't naive. He's committed. He isn't blind. He's choosing to see the best version of the man who holds his fate. That's the cruelest part of the world they live in. Even the men who do it right can be erased by a decision made 2 rooms away. Bobby Baccalieri truly thought Tony Soprano was the only boss he had, and that this truth required him to fold his preferences into duty. He saw Tony's power more clearly than most because he never needed it to flatter him. He just needed it to be stable. He valued Tony's loyalty when it was real, forgave more than he should have when it wasn't, and adjusted the temperature of his own soul to stay livable in the heat. Junior taught Bobby that leadership is a ritual. Tony taught him that leadership is a weather pattern. Bobby chose to build a small home under both skies. He didn't dream of a different climate. He packed for the one he had. That's not a lack of imagination. It's the quiet courage of a man who knows that keeping your promises is the only way to survive other people's talent for breaking theirs. So when you listen for what Bobby really thought about Tony, you hear no great speech, no operatic confession. You hear a man doing his job, watching carefully, taking the long view, and betting every day that the boss he respects, fears, and sometimes almost loves will be the boss who shows up tomorrow. And in the deepest, most private chamber of his heart, you hear one more thing, a prayer that the machine will slow down just enough to let his children grow up before the next derailment. If that sounds modest, that's because Bobby's idea of a good life is modest. modest. He wants trains that arrive when they're supposed to. He wants dinners where the interruptions don't come. And he wants a boss who, more often than not, chooses the steady track over the thrilling turn. Junior gave him the map. Tony gave him the speed. Bobby tried to keep them both on the rails.